Welcome back. So we are very excited to introduce you all to two gentlemen who have come up with a really awesome solution to I would say to our biggest problem. We want to introduce you all to Sameer Jafri and Rory Beyer from Avive Solutions. So, gentlemen, welcome.
Awesome to be here.
Thank you.
We usually have an applause meter.
Yeah,
it must be broken.
We can do it for ourselves. Yeah,
for yourselves. Yeah. So we've got a lot to talk about, and this is an incredibly exciting thing, and something that is going to be disruptive in not only the AED industry, but really in the whole cardiac arrest community. But before we get into that, we need to hear a little bit about you guys, who you are, where you came from, your just kind of what makes you tick, because I think that's brings a lot to the project and what we're doing. So I don't know which one of y'all want to start, but
well, the journey for Avive begins with Rory, so I think I should start there. And
let's start there. Where were you born? Was it nighttime, daytime?
I was born out in California in the San Francisco area. It was 10 p.m. I think 10:05. So, I'm a nighttime baby, I suppose. But no, I was born and raised in California. I grew up there. One of the things that, I really got into as a, teenager in high school and all of that kind of stuff was the outdoors and athletics. I ran cross country. I ran track. I spent a few summers as a backpacking guide up in Yosemite National Park. And really just fell in love with it. So, after kind of upbringing, I got out to Boston to go to college out at MIT, and I studied electrical engineering and mechanical engineering while I was out there. And so moved out to Boston, went through that. We'll probably get into it, but the origins of Avive came out of our final year, myself and our third co-founder, Mosley, our final year at MIT as part of a capstone design course that we'll get into. But for me personally, born and raised in California, went out to Boston for college, and then came back to California to found the company.
Awesome. And we'll come back to that. But Sameer, introduce yourself and kind of tell us a little bit your background.
Yeah. Hey everyone, my name's Sameer. I'm from down south. I'm from Texas, and I was born and raised in Houston. That's where most of my family lives, and have a really large family out there. But growing up, I was very much into sports, maybe not as crazy as Rory with the outdoors, and maybe you guys will get him to tell a couple of those crazy stories on this. We'll see. But fell in love with baseball and played at baseball for about 18 years of my life. And, I'm an Astros fan. I'll proclaim it on this podcast. I'm not scared. No, I'm from Houston, moved out to California, San Diego specifically, when I was about 10 or so, and have lived in California since then. Had the fortune to go to college at UCLA and study nothing related to anything we're doing here. I got a political science degree, but while I was there, was really fortunate to be able to start a nonprofit in the space of cardiac arrest prevention in youth. And that's really how my story tied into what Rory and Mosley were doing. Well, I'm sure we'll get into it, but it was through that I met them at an industry conference in early 2017. And that's kind of how the story of Avive began. My dad's a serial entrepreneur, and I told him that I thought what he did is incredibly boring when I was younger, but I guess I'm eating my words now. So,
and just to back up on that. So you started a nonprofit while you were in college. What year in college were you?
I was freshman going into my sophomore year. And so maybe the quick backstory is, family's been impacted by cardiac arrest through multiple generations. It's something that I was exposed to in my childhood, and something that was an important part of my life. And so when I got to college at UCLA, I was inspired by a nonprofit in San Diego called the Eric Paredes Save a Life Foundation. And that was started by Rena and Hector Paredes in honor her son, or their son, Eric, who passed from cardiac arrest as a freshman in high school. Perfectly healthy, great wrestler. And they found him on the kitchen floor one day, unfortunately passed from cardiac arrest. And that created a lot of waves in the San Diego community when things like that happen. And my mom was a physician at the same clinic as Rena. She was a nurse, and started volunteering at Rena's heart screenings that they started to put on to try to detect undetected heart conditions in youth. And I got really involved in that foundation. There's a really embarrassing picture of me that's like on their truck with all their ECG screening supplies as like their poster boy. And so I kind of was indoctrinated and just had to keep going with it, I guess. And so when I got to college, I started a nonprofit, and it's still running today. It's called Saving Hearts Foundation. We've screened over 5,000 kids and have found 1 in 300 kids had a condition that they didn't know about before. So became big part of my life.
And Sameer, I want to ask, that was you said that was completely independent of your major and of your studies, correct?
Yep, not a lot of ECG screenings in the political science degree. So yeah.
So that's pretty remarkable for someone to have a passion like that and take that on, with a demanding load that you had, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, so, no, it was very much a passion project. But yeah, go ahead, Jason.
So let me start with that. Do you mind talking about a little bit more about what had happened in your family and kind of what drove your passion for cardiac arrest?
One of the things that inspired me to really get involved in this space was, my family's been touched by cardiac arrest throughout multiple generations, starting with my great grandfather, who passed way too young in his, late 30s, early 40s. Have had people in their 50s in my family pass suddenly. Most recently had elders, in his late 70s, but probably still too young and was completely healthy, passed as well following having a surgery. So there wasn't like a specific one cardiac arrest event that really drove me to get involved in this, but it's been something that's touched us throughout multiple generations. As well as being close to Rena and Hector Paredes and really getting involved in that foundation. I think the tie to me really there, guys, was like Eric was an amazing wrestler. I was an athlete, my student athlete my whole life. And I was like, holy cow, this can happen to someone my age. We're both equally healthy, normal kids, and it can just happen out of nowhere. And now someone's life and a community's life completely changes. That was the moment it really hit me. Like, it happens in your family, but that one was like, darn, it can happen to someone just like me. And that's what really drove me to start getting involved and start Saving Hearts Foundation when I got to college.
Nice. So let's go back to Rory. So Rory, you're enrolled in school, and you said you're studying engineering. As you came to your capstone project, tell us about kind of where you were and how you decided to do the capstone project that you did.
Yeah, it was a fun journey. The premise of the capstone is that every graduating senior at MIT in mechanical engineering has to take, one of 2 capstone design courses. And in one of them, you actually get teamed up with a fairly large team, and you get 1 semester to brainstorm a bunch of different ideas, prototype some of them, get a little further along with 1 or 2 of them, and then, in the end, settle upon one that you build a really working, functional prototype with by the end of the semester. And there's a lot of financial support that goes into this course, and there's a lot of resources that you get to do quick turn fabrications and get into the machine shops and really do things quickly. So as part of that brainstorming, Mosley and I were good friends. And one of the first exercises you have to do is come up with 20 ideas, for one of the days of this course, kind of in the early days. And we're sitting there in the, in my dormitory room, and basically we're at idea number 19 and we're trying to get to number 20. And Mosley kind of sits there and he's thinking, and that day he had been in a research lab with a different friend where they were defibrillating rabbits. They were doing some studies on responses to defibrillating rabbits in some different ways, and he was sitting there playing on his phone, and he kind of just says, I think there's enough energy in your phone to like defibrillate something. And we kind of sit there, we're like, I don't think that's really a real thing. I think that's kind of silly. That like, there's no way. But we needed a 20th idea, and so we put it down. And so we got there. People thought it was a pretty interesting idea. You know, would there be a possibility to make a defibrillator actually from a cell phone? Was kind of the pathway that we were thinking along. And we chose it as one of the initial ideas that we were going to prototype, again, just as this kind of far out there idea. Maybe there's something interesting there. The premise and kind of motivation behind it was really more, if you could do something like that, you can offload a lot of things from what a current defibrillator has, and you can make it small, you can make it portable, you can make it something that is viable for my, you know, backpacking, guiding out in Yosemite. You can make it, ski patrollers have it. You can, a lot of use cases that could benefit from something that's more in your pocket and, you know, whatever. And so,
okay, hang on a second. I got to stop there for just a second, because I want to go back to that, because I want to get your reaction again when Mosley said that. Like, you're going to take a phone, and what year is this, and what generation phone are we talking about? Is this like,
so yeah,
I mean, not to say a brand or anything, but
Here
like,
we go. Here
like,
we go.
But when you hear this, is this like, this is insane, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, there's no way, is it gonna like blow up your phone to take that much? Like, how realistic was this, and how serious was he?
you know, I gotta say the initial reaction was one of there's no way. That was the reaction of, there's no way that you've got enough power in your phone. I don't even know if you can extract power from a phone, right? There's power supposed to go into the phone to charge it, not out of it, right?
Yeah.
And you've got this whole problem of, you know, like, who knows what kind of phone people have? People have iPhones, people have Android phones, people have Motorola phones. This was, you know, fall of 2016, right? So, you know, phones were advanced enough at that point that they were, you know, smart, and they had a lot of features in them. But yeah, the initial reaction was, there's no way. I don't even think it would work from an energy perspective, even if you could do it. And we need a 20th idea, so fine, we'll put it, but like, there's no way that's going to work. That was the reaction.
Okay, so even when he mentioned it, this was just kind of a crazy 20th idea, not really thought through of whether or not it was even feasible, just kind of just a crazy thing somebody throwing out there.
Yeah, and I think, you know, Mosley
did the energy calculation. And
yeah, you know, Mosley, like, he sat there, he defended it there for a couple minutes of like, no, I think that you could do this and that, and it would work. And I just kind of rolled my eyes, and I said,
Okay.
like, okay, like, fine, good enough to put on the list, but I don't believe you.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay, so go from there. We got past the this is crazy to all right, keep going.
Yeah, and so we get to this. We go to it. People are really interested in this idea. Both our team, other people that kind of are involved in this process, and so we end up going with it and trying it as one of the kind of 4 or 5 that we're going to prototype and really try. And you know, Mosey's convinced at this point, and he's convinced himself that the energy calculations do work, and that it is possible, and if you could do it, then it could work. And so there's a kind of smaller team that focuses on this prototype. There's a couple other teams that focus on other ones, etc. And, you know, we kind of get going in this process, and we're a couple weeks in, and, you know, we're able to actually start doing much smaller scale versions of a defibrillator, where we might not do a full 150 joule shock that you might expect from a defibrillator, but we can maybe do a 10 or 20 joule shock.
Okay.
We can actually get power out of a phone, and we can have it go and charge something in our device, and we can have it kind of be used to discharge into some load, and that seems to work. And so it kind of makes it to the final 2 projects that we have to choose from. And there's enough of a proof of concept there that the team decides, like, this one, if we can actually pull it off, we think could have a huge impact, right? I mean, the initial idea was in this space of, again, more the wilderness medicine, the portable use case, the making it a little bit more friendly and intuitive to a user who's never used one of these things before, because you're just using your phone, right, to use this defibrillator. And so we were convinced, and we picked it as our project we were going to go for. And the next month was essentially about taking it from that proof of concept point to something that was a fully working defibrillator. And so we spent a month, and the team was just completely like in the lab all the time, all day, all night. And we ended up in December, and that would have been December of 2016, coming to our final presentations for this course with a device that worked. And so you have to understand that this kind of final presentation is a very big deal when you're kind of in that scenario. And so it's a few thousand people that are there live in the largest auditorium at MIT. You've got several thousand more that are live streaming the event online and watching it. You have a band that is playing custom songs for each colored team. So we were the pink team, so it's playing a custom pink team song that they wrote for this as like an intro to us coming on stage. Like it's kind of that they really have a whole production value to this thing. And we go, and really the demonstration is plugging in a phone, having that phone take about a minute to charge up a defibrillator, and then delivering a full 150 joule biphasic shock from that device. The device at the time was something that was fairly small. It was kind of a tube shaped, and I think very small compared to anything out there today. And that really was the the goal of this final presentation, that we were able to build this prototype that worked.
Okay, so explain that a little bit more, and I know I'm probably not going to understand any of it, but so you have a phone. Where do you plug into it? I mean, is it just defibrillator pads you plug into the power cord and you hit shock and boom, 150 joules come out? How does that kind of in easy terms work?
Yeah, no, so basically you got to imagine we had this kind of water bottle size and water bottle shaped device. And the top of it had a little cap, and you would take the cap off, and there'd be like a 3-prong cable. So it had a lightning port for an Apple phone, it had the Android phone one, and it had like a USB-C one, or I think those are the 3. And you would basically pop it off, you'd plug in one of those items, and when you plugged it in, essentially the device would start pulling power from the phone immediately. So it'd start kind of extracting power, and extracting it slowly from the phone, and charging up some of the internal electronics that exist in this device. At the same time, your phone would launch an app that was built onto the phone, and it would know that to do so because you plugged it into the defibrillator device, and it would essentially start talking, so giving you audio instructions and giving you some visuals on the app as well for what to do, i.e. go place the pads on the patient, and etc. So the pads were also tucked within this kind of top that you popped off, right? You could pull them out as a little pull tab, and you could put them on a patient, and it would show you a picture of how you were supposed to place them. And the thought was, although it took a minute to charge up, it takes a minute for anybody to set the thing up and get the pads on the person anyway. And so you weren't really losing a whole lot of time. It would take about 1.5% of the phone battery per shock, and that was it, which is pretty remarkable.
At 150 joules takes about a 1.5% from the phone.
That's what we were seeing. Yeah.
Okay.
And then basically it would at the time we had not developed a full-on algorithm to actually detect whether you were in a cardiac arrest or not. That was just more of it's a shock box at that point. That was maybe a future development activity that would have been needed. But we really just at that point delivered this basic biphasic defibrillation shock into a mannequin that we had set up, where it had some pads that you could shock into on this mannequin. And so kind of the demo was, you would take the device, you'd pop off the cap, you'd plug it into the phone, you would have the phone app launch, walk you through how to use it, including placing the pads on this mannequin that could absorb the shock. You would deliver the shock, and then you could see a big graph on the big screen of the shock measurement, and showing that it's the proper 150 joules, and that it's the appropriate waveform, and all of that.
So 2 questions on that. How fast did you get feedback? Did you get feedback from the crowd or from your professors in general? And then also, were you met with any skepticism, or did they start immediately like, oh, this will never work like that? But what was the feedback like?
Oh, there was definite feedback from both an engineering perspective and a what I'll call like a should you really be using people's phones to do something like this perspective, maybe. And so from an engineering perspective, of course, during the course, you're getting a lot of, feedback from your professors and from your lab instructors on how to design things, how to build things. And that's kind of what you're expecting. We also did user interviews with some, groups, some nonprofits that were in the cardiac arrest space for kind of what kind of features they would want, all that type of stuff. And then from a feedback perspective, externally, there's really none until that moment, right? Until you're at the, you're not sharing anything about this. You file some provisional patents before the final presentation, even. You don't share anything about it until that moment. And there's a really funny moment that I remember, actually, which was there's a lot of industry representatives that come to this, including some from Apple, some from other technology companies. And Apple's always been a little bit more locked down in terms of what they permit your phone to do. And so there is this, kind of approval process to be able to even extract power from an Apple phone that's a lot more stringent than it was at the time for non-Apple phones. And so there was a question that got asked at some point of, oh, you use an Android phone for your demo. Why didn't you use an Apple phone? And we gave this really, at the time, we thought smart response, to the Apple people sitting in the front row there of, well, our Apple friends here, require a little more approvals and they're not quite ready to give it to a bunch of college kids. And so we need to, use the Android one for now. Right. And so that was kind of like a fun little moment for us. But in general, it was very well received. So when we delivered that shock, the audience had a big old applause, a little bit of a, deep breath of air for the team that, it worked. And then after that, you get into kind of the rest of the presentation and into questions and answers and all of that portion of it.
So what was your time frame from idea to this presentation?
About 3 months.
Doesn't that just make you feel inadequate, Jason? Like me, I listen to that and I'm like, the intelligence is annoying.
It's annoying.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't even know like an intelligent question to even ask. So, okay, so this sounds just absolutely insane. But just to put this in perspective, how many other projects are going on at this presentation, and where does this fit? Is this just like blowing everybody away, or is this MIT and this is like okay, this is what we do?
Yeah, there's 8 projects. There's typically a like quote winning project of the year, and this one was the winning project of the year.
Okay, so out of 8 projects, this one took the top prize. I mean, won the whole thing.
Yeah. And there's a bunch of other cool ones, obviously, and every year there's a bunch of cool ones that come out of it. But yeah, it was very well received, and afterwards, you have sort of an open kind of area where people can come up, and we got a lot of people coming up wanting to see the device, want to hold it, want to understand how it works, all those types of things. So it was very well received in general.
Okay, so in the days following, does this just become a, oh, what a nice project, we got a good grade, we got a good award, now let's move on to what we're going to do with the rest of our lives? Where did you go from here with that?
Yeah, it was really one of those situations that comes about just by happenstance. One of the groups that we had done a user interview kind of along the way with to get some ideas for features and what people might like was a nonprofit group called Parent Heart Watch. And they have an annual conference that happens in January every year. And so they saw our presentation, right? Because it was, live streamed, and we had, reached out to them about it. So they had an interest in it. And shortly after it, they sent us an email saying, hey, we have this annual conference in January. It's in Tucson, Arizona. We'd love for you to come present your device to the conference. And January for MIT is this weird semester period where you don't have your normal classes. You're kind of you can take some special classes that are like 1 month, just focused efforts, or you can not do anything. You can travel, you can go get some internships, whatever you want to do. And so for me, I was in Boston. This was a free trip to Arizona where it was going to be nice and warm in January. And of the team, I was the only one that wanted to go, basically. And so I got my free plane ticket. I was, at my free hotel room, real excited about it. And I flew out there. And so that really ended up being a very monumental decision that I did not appreciate at the time. I thought we were just going to go present it and, it'd be interesting and we'd move on, like you said, to what we're going to do with our lives and with our careers. But we ended up having a really fantastic conference at this event in January. And so I show up. The first night of the conference is a very emotional night. One of the big themes and one of the big focuses for this is parents who have lost children to cardiac arrest or have had near misses, and have had children who have been saved, thankfully. But the first night, obviously I know nobody there. I kind of walk into the big banquet hall. I kind of linger in the back because I don't really know what's going to happen and because I don't know anybody. And so I just kind of wait till there's no more seats left. And I'll just take the last one. It's kind of my approach. And so I wait for that to happen. I find that last little empty seat. I sit down in that last little empty seat and I just start talking to the table, and they're like, who are you? What are you doing here? I tell them about this device that we built, and they're just like super interested in it, right? They're just kind of like asking all these questions, and they're like really fascinated, and they're really interested. And then the programming starts where it's, tributes to all these children who have lost their life. I mean, it's one of the most emotional evenings I've probably ever had in my life. It just hits you so hard when you see these pictures, when you see parents, when you see community members who have been so impacted by these things. And so that was just a insane night, right? Of just not expecting any of that emotion, not expecting to meet anybody who would really care about why I was there. Just totally different than what I thought. The person who I sat next to, knew of one other low 20s individual. There's not too many of them at these kind of conferences. And that was Sameer, who was there for Saving Hearts Foundation for his nonprofit. And so the next day, they made an introduction as two of the only people, under the age of like, I don't know, 35, 40 maybe. And so we met, and I told them about the device, and we really hit it off from there. There was a scheduled slot where we were going to have our presentation, and I had this kind of whole long presentation about like this device and how it worked, and all this like technical detail and all this stuff. And I remember like showing Sameer this presentation and him just saying, so you need to do none of that. You need to go up there and you need to do a demo of your thing and say really high level stuff, but you shouldn't just be like talking about how this thing works up there. This is a really, really interesting thing that you've built here. And so when it came time for the conference presentation, I get up there, a little bit nervous, obviously. It was a well-attended presentation. I think pretty much everybody went to this one, which I was not expecting. And I start to do a demo, and there's just this moment where I'm on stage. I'm like, got my little mannequin set up on a table. I've got the device on that table ready to demo. And the entire conference hall, I mean, hundreds of people stand up, like literally stand up out of their seats and just like, I don't want to say mob, but aggressively crowd the stage at the front so they can see this like in a better way. And that was just this moment of like, oh my goodness, like people are really interested in this. And so like I do my demo, I think it goes over well. And I just like night and day. Before that, I knew the few people that I'd been introduced to or happened to sit next to at some meal or something like that. And after that, I was just everybody's best friend. Like I couldn't have a moment of not being just like bombarded with people, whether it was like manufacturers, reps, whether it was medical professionals, whether it was legislative people, whether it was parents, whether it was nonprofit, people, just the whole gamut was just so interested in learning about this. And I think for me, that was the moment where it really shifted to, we've got something here worth doing, because seeing that type of validation from, a group that I viewed as the trenches of cardiac arrest, right? And sees this every day, lives this every day, breathes this every day, have that much excitement and anticipation about this product. That's different, and that's more special than seeing even the response at MIT, right? Because that's a technology focus. We've built a really cool product, really interesting technology, but there's a real need for this. And just these stories that I had parents come up to me and tell, hey, if this device existed, that could have been the difference. that we could have had this thing out of the baseball field when Johnny, had his cardiac arrest, and in tears telling me something like that. And just the impact that you can instantly see from that type of moment was just special, was a huge turning point, and really shifted the thought process to maybe we should really pursue this as a company.
Had you ever had any experience in medicine, or ever thought that you would ever get into the world of medicine at all, even, by technology like this?
I I really didn't. I mean, I was never opposed to it, but it was never something that I was particularly drawn to. Mosley was a little bit more on the biomedical and mechanical engineering side, and
Mhm.
so he, I think, did have a little bit more of a passion for kind of the medicine or biomedical engineering type of work.
Yeah.
Um, I had interned at Apple the previous summer, so
Oh,
speaking of
wow.
all these, these technologies, like that's probably what I was going to go do, right? Is just go, be a product engineer at Apple, like not in healthcare.
So that's why I'm asking. Like, I can't imagine the massive feeling of, oh my gosh, I could potentially change people's lives. I mean, was it overwhelming? Was it like an instant thing, or had you kind of known that for a while?
It was a pretty instant thing, to be honest. I think that like you kind of peripherally know it when you're developing a medical device, right, in this prototyping phase, but you don't really like appreciate it in the same way that when you are hearing it and seeing it that directly from the people who are using it, who are knowing that problem and who are living it, right? And so like yes, you kind of know it. Hey, this device could really do a lot to to a lot of people. That when you're developing it, but you don't really feel that until you come face to face with the people that it's most going to impact, I think.
So let me take this from your point of view, Sameer. So kind of take us back to that first evening when, this little timid college student sits down next to you, and, you start to have this conversation. Tell us your perspective of that evening.
Well, so I was a bad speaker at this conference and showed up late. So I was not there that first evening on Friday night. Although my friends are the ones he sat next to. And I call them friends because I had worked with them so closely and really developed a friendship in the world of cardiac arrest prevention in youth specifically. And that's what Parent Heart Watch is they do unbelievable work across the country, bringing together nonprofits that are focused on preventing cardiac arrest in youth, both through preventative screening, but also helping deploy AEDs in areas where youth are frequently, like sports fields, school districts, etc. So I wasn't there that night, and so Rory was on his own. But that next morning is where maybe I entered the picture. Our friend Liz Lazar and Pam Dodson at a nonprofit called Via Heart Project in the Bay Area came up to me at breakfast, and it's early in the morning, like 7:30, and they're so excited. And they come and sit next to me like, Sameer, there's this kid. He's from Boston. You're going to sit next to him today. And I was like, okay. Hi, Liz. Nice to see you. But that's how it happened. And so then it was kind of like motherly thing where they bring Rory and like, Rory, sit here. Sameer, sit here. And we sat next to each other throughout the day at the conference. And just as people were presenting, I guess we weren't really listening. We were more just talking and learning about what each other did and our backgrounds. And I immediately, unlike Rory, maybe who needed the experience to and feeling the emotion from the people there to understand the potential massive impact he could have, I think I knew it in like 5 seconds, and just like everybody else in that room did. And so I was immediately enthused by it. I thought we've got to somehow convince these guys to like continue on with this work, because I think Rory, to be fair, like at that moment you were just like, yeah, we're just gonna like, it's cool, we did it, and now we're gonna go on with our lives, like you said. But kind of my mission that weekend became like somehow convince them that this is worth pursuing after college. And yeah, you have these cool jobs lined up and all that from MIT, but like this is the thing that is going to make an impact and a difference in the world. And so we talked even like late that night. I remember in your room, that's when we were looking at your presentation. And of course, this guy being an engineer and like, wanting to show how cool what him and Mosley and the team had built there, had all these like details technically of how they built it. And we were like, no, man, you got to take all that out because like you're gonna have to go actually do this and build a company one day, and you don't want to give away all that information your first day here. And so that's really where I came at it from, was like, all right, this is going to be big, and it's going to make an impact on people. And that's what I love and am driven by the most, is working on projects that can help others. And so my mission the next 2 days became find a way to make them keep going with it beyond that day, that weekend.
Yeah. So Rory, what did that sound like? Were you on a different path of, you had some stuff lined up and you just kind of took a left turn there and decided, no, this is going to become your life's work?
Pretty much. I had interned at Apple the previous summer. I probably was going to go back and work at Apple the next year, and that was really all that I had in my mind at that point, and just a normal, tech job, and it would be good and it'd be interesting. And so, yeah, I think that going into that weekend, I truly was there because it was a plane ticket that was paid for and a hotel that was paid for, and it was warm in Tucson instead of being in the winter in Boston. And like, why not? Right. It's been an interesting experience. Like, that's why I went. And so I walked out of that with a very different mindset than that, which is good in the end. But yeah, it was a big decision to go in at the end of the day.
So kind of take us from there of how did some of the conversations happen with, you really have something here that you could maybe make a company from?
Yeah. Well, yeah, go ahead, Rory. You your perspective. Yeah.
Well, no. So I think one of the things that we did immediately after the conference was we decided that at minimum we wanted to keep working on the project. And so we found a way to essentially, get a few of the people from the original project team involved in the spring semester to sign up for an independent study in electrical engineering or an independent study in mechanical engineering and get some class credit and elective credit for working on this, basically. And we decided that we were going to do that immediately, right? And so we said we are going to put some time into this. We are going to make it happen in the spring, keep developing the product, get it to a better state, all of those types of things. In parallel, we started talking to Sameer, and we started, Sameer was obviously very interested in getting involved and either just supporting it or just being involved in team directly, like anything to get the thing to market, which was awesome, right? I mean, we had somebody who not just was a supporter at the conference, but somebody who was like, let's do this, or like, you need to do this. And so I think that pushing certainly helped a lot. We ended up, reaching the decision point and where Sameer came out to Boston for a weekend. And, me and Sameer and Mosley sat in a room and we kind of hashed out what it would look like to found a company, and all of the kind of initial logistics of, how the company would be structured and kind of all of the administrative things behind what it would look like. Just logistically, where would it be? Would it be in Boston? Would it be in California? All of these types of things. And I think we walked out of that weekend with a pretty good game plan that this is something we wanted to do. We went out and found some corporate attorneys to help us with some of the incorporation work. And we ended up actually incorporating the company, before we had even graduated. And so at that point we were in.
2017 is the date of incorporation for Avive. And so
say that date one more time.
March 28th, 2017.
And at this point, are you still going down the road of this is a phone application? Like you can still use
100%
a phone for this? Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So we are still cell phone powered AED. That is the project at that stage.
Excellent.
And Rory said it nicely, guys. I was probably the most annoying pest that they ever had encountered after that conference, just like constantly pushing them. But that's like how strongly I like really believed in the opportunity. And so I'll say sorry, what is it, 6 years later, for being really annoying, but I'm not that sorry now. So
okay, so take us through some of those. What were some of the obstacles you ran into with it being a phone? I mean, what were some of the benefits of it being a phone, of not just it being, everywhere, but what are some of the benefits that the phone had to being used as an AED?
I think some of the big ones to kind of get us started, at least in our thinking at the time, was you could offload a lot of things to a phone. You've got a speaker, you've got a screen, you've got some processing power that's on the phone. You've got a battery source that's from the phone, right? You've got all of these things that are relatively helpful to make the actual defibrillator piece as small as possible, as affordable as possible. And that was really the angle we came at it, right? This is something that needs to be small, it needs to be lightweight, it needs to be able to go anywhere, it needs to be something of that nature. I think one of the very immediate hurdles that we ran into was a regulatory one, which was, how do you guarantee, as a highly regulated, life-saving, life-critical medical device, how do you guarantee that with every version of a phone and every version of software that can be on that phone, that it's going to work? Because that is immediately a red flag, right? What if there is some version or some incompatibility, or it only works with these types of phones, and you go to use a product and it doesn't work? And that is a worst case scenario, right? Where you think you've got a product that can save somebody's life, you're depending on that product to save somebody's life, you go to use it and it doesn't work. And so I think the very quick hurdle that we ran into was, I don't know that this is going to be something that is going to fly from a regulatory perspective. And that kind of got us onto a different train of thinking, which was, how do we get a lot of the benefits from the phone, and how do we incorporate some of the benefits that we see from having a phone into a device?
Were these some of your attorneys telling you this, or did you kind of arrive at these conclusions yourself?
I think it was a combination of attorneys and some of our regulatory advisors that we got involved with the company. So maybe less the legal attorneys, but more so, FDA regulatory experts, quality regulatory experts, people who have really lived this and breathed this their entire careers. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So what was your solution for some of those issues?
Well, we the solution is the Avive Connect AED. I think so in general, the way we approach it is, we believe that one of the largest benefits that we can incorporate from the phone into a device, other than size and cost savings and things of that nature, is connectivity. Devices up until that point were largely, if not all, very limited on this front. And they were the device that, it works if you get it there and if you know how to use it, but it doesn't really solve the issue of, where is this thing? What is its status? And is it going to work when and where you need it? And so we really believe from an early stage that one of the most valuable aspects of the phone is the fact that you've got this Wi-Fi, this cellular, this GPS connectivity that you can utilize in a lot of really interesting ways. Whether that is maintenance of your products, whether that is knowing how to get a product to the patient who needs it, whether that is transferring data that's valuable. There's a lot of really interesting use cases that come out of that, but we thought that connectivity was one of the core assets that we had when we were using the phone. The second big one was, on a technological scale, we had taken what is traditionally a battery that is the size of our product almost at this point, and we had been able to make a functioning defibrillator from a battery that fits in your cell phone. And that's a pretty different and interesting way to architect a defibrillator. And so one of the ways that we go about making our device very small, in the same spirit of a phone, is it's a rechargeable battery, just like your phone is. And it's something that is not the size of a typical AED battery. It's very small. And so we've taken a lot of the technology that we had, even though it's maybe coming from a different thing. It's not coming from an external phone, it's coming from an internal battery. We've taken the same technology and applied it to kind of get those same size decreases and some other advantages that we believe in as well. So the size of it and the portability could stay. We just had a dedicated internal battery, and we didn't have to rely on the phone to get all of your power source like we had in the original prototypes. So connectivity, the battery architecture, and then there were a few other learnings that we had from the user interface of using the phone as how you use this product that we really applied as well, right? So having graphics that you see while you're using the device. In addition to audio instructions, we now have a screen on our actual product, right? So there's a few different parallels, but in a lot of ways we're trying to take some of these advantages that we see from a phone and apply them to the AED in the end as well.
And so, Sameer, from your understanding, you've been in the space for a few years now. What was your understanding of how this was going to address some of the problems of current AEDs? Certainly there have been laws that have passed that we have AEDs all over the country. How would this become different than some of the ones that are on the market?
Well, when we initially started with a cell phone powered AED, the first thought in my mind was access, right? And so increasing accessibility of the device, and that was really the thesis then, alongside some of these other things. When we really shifted our focus to what Rory just described, which is creating this connected, highly portable, approachable device is a word we use a lot, trying to make it feel like something we use every day of our life. To me, it solved a number of issues, but I think the one that makes the biggest impact for us is exactly what Rory said, which is connectivity. Connectivity is the gateway to so much more than what we have today, and it's the gateway to integrating the defibrillator into the system of care that exists in communities today for responding to a cardiac arrest emergency. So we can build a nice portable device. We can make it look all fancy. It can be rechargeable now like it is. All of these things are cool. But if we can't figure out how to network that device into a system of response such that we're getting it to patients more quickly and more often than we are today, we've missed the boat and we've solved the wrong problem, in my mind. We can add more complexity to the AED. We can add more features that help you even when you get the AED there. But if we can't get the AED to the patient's side, we can't, none of that matters at the end of the day. And so I think connectivity really opened our eyes to exploring really unique ways to solve what we call the delivery problem in a cardiac arrest emergency of early intervention and early defibrillation. And I think that's probably where we feel most excited, not only today, but about what we can do going forward in the future to even improve the system of response even more.
So again, in your understanding of how AEDs traditionally have been built, how they have been deployed, how their look is somewhat intimidating, and we even see AED cabinets even today that say for trained responders only. They don't look like something that's useful. How did that go into some of your ideas for the design of your current AED?
Yeah, I can start. Go ahead if you want to add more. I think the approachability thing doesn't seem like maybe it'd be forefront in our minds, but I think it's everything. After you get the device there, making someone feel empowered such that they can figure out how to use this thing on their own in the probably most stressful situation that they'll ever encounter in their life, if you're a layperson bystander in particular, is absolutely paramount. I do this little thing when we onboard somebody today. I know Rory probably does it also. I stick an AED in front of them and I say, go. And the response is amazing. It's like this, like, oh my gosh, what am I? And it's not even an emergency, right? And so I think that sentiment and that feeling, while AEDs today certainly save lives, and they've saved countless lives, trying to break down that barrier of feeling like I can do this and I'm empowered to do this and this thing's going to help me, to me was very important. I think to our team was very important. But Rory, why don't you talk about some of the specifics that we thought of when it comes to how we solve that?
Some of it comes down to the interface, right? So when you look at the product, is your immediate reaction when you first look at that product one of, oh my gosh, that looks like a complicated medical device? Or is it one of, okay, I could pick that thing up? And that tiny little initial reaction, we believe is critical. Yes, you can put signage. Yes, you can try to do more trainings. Yes, you can try to bring more awareness, and we should do all of those things. But you need to have a product that has a reaction that is as much as possible one of I can do this, as opposed to one of I'm scared to do this or I'm intimidated to do this. And we believe that some of the design decisions, whether it's the screen being right there on the front, just like you're used to interacting every day with your phone, whether it is the industrial design of the product that is a little bit more rounded and it looks and feels like a consumer product, not like the box that feels more medical. Those types of small details in the design of what it looks like, we believe contribute to that and make it such that it's going to be the reaction that we want, and one that is more likely to get somebody to be willing to either pick it up and bring it to that person who needs it, or when they get there, actually use it on the person who needs it.
And I just want to point out, this is so cool to me that you're talking about these characteristics that most companies, when they are thinking about these things, are thinking about selling a product. You're thinking about having somebody save a life with this product because of these characteristics. I just think that's so cool. It's very awesome.
I'll add one more, Brandon, that was really eye-opening to us. And so when you use when you power on our AED, in every AED, the pads typically, traditionally today, depict a male, right? Our AED, the visual instructions as well as the pads depict a bare-breasted female, which is totally different than any other AED on the market today, but very intentional. We did a ton of usability testing early on, where we asked untrained lay people to come and use our device and evaluated if they could use it safely and effectively, and get that life-saving shock to, in that case, a mannequin, but a simulated person quickly, right? And we wouldn't just test like a mannequin with a white t-shirt. We would put coats on them. We would put bras on the mannequins. We would put 3 layers so that it was complicated and they had to figure out how to actually make sure we were placing pads on bare skin. And what was really interesting to us is when we put a bra on a mannequin, people wouldn't take it off, and you'd have situations where you'd have pads touching underwire, which could be dangerous, as you guys are aware and know. And so we thought, well, let's add the simple instruction, expose the patient's bare chest, including bra. And then let's also show a bare-breasted female. And the minute we did that, the bras came off. But it's like those small things that we really deeply care about, that is maybe different than how other companies have approached this, but we think makes the smallest difference in the moment when someone is incredibly stressed and trying to respond to this patient, that can ultimately help save a life. Even that 1%, 2%, 3% better really makes a difference in our eyes.
So out of curiosity, was that done with a lot of research? I mean, we know that pretty clearly that females get CPR much less often than males. Is that something you knew, or is that just something that you kind of inferred based on, just some information that you had?
Definitely knew it. The statistics are there. The research is super clear that bystander intervention with females is just way less, right, than males. And so to us, like it's a way to create a little more equitable response for both genders. And I'm sure we'll talk about this later as well, where disparities of all kinds are a huge problem in cardiac arrest. A disparity in this situation is gender, right? And so we definitely knew it, but I think it became pretty clear. Rory, you might add something here as well, during the usability testing that we did.
Yeah, I would describe it as, it's one of those things, the statistic and that there's research about it. And we thought, probably going into those studies that we were going to be doing, that we've built a device that's a little bit more usable and maybe more designed for the consumer and all these great things. But then when you see it, and you see it in your own usability studies, you see it with your product, you see it in these scenarios, it really crystallizes the stat that from the research, right? And I think that that's the jump that we probably needed. And I think that when we saw it, we were able to really realize, look, this is a improvement area that we need, and we need to do some focus into trying to make this better, because not only is it a stat, we are now seeing that stat is very real, And we can do these small things to make it happen less.
I want to go back to the connectivity, which is really the part of this that is one of the unique things. We'll talk a little bit later about the other thing that from a healthcare provider that I find very fascinating. But let's go back to the connectivity. So Sameer, I want you to kind of go through. I've heard you say this before, but if you are in a building and a cardiac arrest happens just on the other side of the wall, take us through kind of that scenario currently, and then how you've used this Avive AED to address that.
Yeah, and I think you set it up perfectly there, where let's just walk through that, right? I'm in a building and person next to me drops and collapses. They're not responsive. I call 911, I hope, right? Someone calls 911. What happens then? The 911 operator is going to confirm location. They're going to confirm address. And then they're going to start going down a decision tree of questions, right? And one of the first ones that they'll ask is this patient responsive? Your answer is probably going to be no. And then I hope they ask, is this patient breathing normally? Keyword, normally. And if the answer to that is no, right, we're going down in their mind the cardiac arrest tree, okay? And one of the questions they'll ask as they're about to encourage you and ask you to start performing CPR and walking you through CPR instructions is there an AED nearby? Well, I don't know. I'm not the expert. You're the expert 911 telecommunicator. You tell me if there's an AED nearby. That is probably the reaction most of the time. There's a lot of data that we've gotten from our partner communities that we're going to be deploying our technology in, where it's 90+% of the time. In Jackson, Tennessee, it's actually 97+% of the time. The answer to that question, is there an AED nearby, is no, or I don't know, which is, I think, what we'd all expect to be the case. The funny thing is, it's not funny, actually. The unfortunate thing is there is an AED nearby a lot of the time, but it's a data gap. And there's lack of situational awareness between the two parties there. And that's what happens today, is you could have an AED across the wall, but the people across the wall or across the building have no idea that you need it in room 205 or whatever it may be. And that data gap is what we really think connectivity can help address by empowering telecommunicators and empowering the key stakeholders involved in a cardiac arrest response: the bystander, the telecommunicator, downstream providers that are going to come take care of this patient, with data at the right place at the right time to help create a more streamlined system. Let's use my literal townhome that I'm in today doing this interview from. I have like 4 AEDs in the current room that I'm in today. I've got every brand that we're all AED geeks on this podcast. So I've got a bunch of AEDs here. But I have a community pool that's literally 100 feet away from me. I can hear people in the community pool if I open my window. And if a cardiac arrest were to happen at the community pool, which wouldn't be crazy to think about it, cardiac arrests happen at pools, I would have no idea that those people need help until I hear the sirens from EMS show up through the gates 8, 9, 10, 15 plus minutes later, depending on how stretched thin EMS is at the moment. But during that entire period of time, I could have run over 100 feet and helped save that person's life, but I just didn't know that they needed defibrillation or they needed that help. And that is the key problem today that we're trying to address at Avive through connectivity.
So, Rory, take us through that technology that you're using in the 911 centers to identify where is the cardiac arrest, and then because we have AEDs that are connected, how can we identify where those AEDs are and potentially get that AED to the location of that cardiac arrest?
Well, what we've done is we've integrated with existing softwares and technologies that are already used in the 911 center and that already have location data of that caller. So when you call 911, they have tools such that they know your lat-long GPS location, or they can ask for an address if you're calling for something that's not directly where your phone is, for example. But the point is that we have a location of a suspected cardiac arrest, and Sameer described the decision tree of, is this person responsive? Is this person breathing normally? And that's the cardiac arrest decision tree. Now what we've done is that 911 telecommunicator has a button that they can press with some of those existing softwares. It's the launch Avive button. And when they press that button, because they've gotten those inputs of not responsive, not breathing normally, and they have a location of the potential arrest, that sends a signal to us at Avive, and any of our AEDs or any of our mobile app users that are nearby that cardiac arrest will receive an alert. So the AED will literally start audibly sounding, and the screen will light up showing you a map of here's where you are, your neighbor across the street, or in Sameer's example, somebody at the community pool 100 feet from your home needs this device. Can you bring it there to help save their life? On your phone, you'll get an Amber Alert type of notification where it's here's where you are, here's where the nearest AED is, here's where the patient is. Can you bring this AED, or can you just go help perform CPR to help save this person's life? And so by integrating into the 911 center, we're able to get that information very quickly after that person has called 911, and we're able to actionize it in the sense that we have our AEDs in our apps that get deployed for people who, like Sameer, may not have otherwise known that there was a cardiac arrest happening right next door, but would be more than willing to grab their AED and go help save that person's life. And by doing that in an organized fashion, we've initiated this program that we call the 4-Minute City program, where we have all of these different stakeholders involved and bought in, and we have a high enough density of these connected devices spread around a community such that we believe and we aspire to get a situation where we can get an AED to any patient in that 4-minute city within 4 minutes. And so with this type of system, we think we can dramatically improve how quickly that patient gets pads on them and their first defibrillation shock, which, as we all know, is one of the most critical, if not the most critical thing that we can do to improve survival rates.
And so before we go into that 4-minute city, when we talk again about the connectivity, and then you talked about the 911 center, knowing where these AEDs are and hitting this button, after they hit the button, do they have oversight, and do they have visibility of where these AEDs are, what the ETA of this AED? Can they give the person who has this AED any additional information on where a patient may be, or how can they get that there a little bit faster?
They do. One of the beauties of this technology is that it's a two-way communication. So typically when a device, because there are devices out there that can contact 911, right? If we've used the Uber app, for example, you can call 911 within the app, or if you have a watch, it can sometimes detect things and try to contact 911 automatically. This is actually the first time where 911 can contact a device. It's usually the other way around, where the device realizes something's wrong and sends a kind of SOS type message, I need help. This is the case where the 911 center is saying, go alert these devices that are out in the world so that they can go be used. But once that button is pressed, to your question, we are streaming data back to the 911 center as well. So we are streaming the location of those AEDs and or those mobile app responders, so they can see that there are 3 AEDs en route, or there's maybe 1 AED en route, but there's 2 others that are close by that are potential options. They can see that there's 1 mobile app responder en route, and they can see that location as that person moves towards the cardiac arrest. That allows them to do a few things. One, when that person is getting close, they can tell the caller that, hey, there's a responder coming and they are about to be at the gate of the pool. Can you please go let them in? Right. So that gives the caller a little bit more confidence that this is somebody who's coming to help them. You can also send notes. So the telecommunicator can add in notes that essentially give information that might be helpful for the response. It might be a gate code. It might be a warning there's a dog out front that you should be careful with. It might be the apartment number in a large building, because how else would you know which room to go to? So it can be a variety of things, but you can send notes to the device that are received to the person responding. Once you're actually using the product, we have data that goes back to the telecommunicator as well. So for example, if a few minutes have gone by and you can see that the device has been activated, but you see that pads haven't been placed on that patient yet, you know that there's probably something going on, and the telecommunicator can use that as a prompt to say, is everything okay? Do you see the pads that are associated with this device, and can you put them on that patient? Is there any problem there? So they can kind of prompt these questions that give them visibility into what is going on at the scene that today doesn't exist at all. I mean, even if you have that case, which is the desired case where you do get an AED there before EMS arrives, the telecommunicator, other than what they can maybe overhear in the background, it's kind of chaotic. They have no idea what's going on at that scene. And so having the visibility of location, of status, of what's happening is extraordinarily valuable for them to help that response in any way that they can.